welcome to What Do You Believe? And we're happy that you're watching, and we're happy to have you back, Michael.
Thank you.
Welcome back, and Heidi, welcome back.
Thank you.
We're excited and happy that you guys are here. We'll welcome your comments, your questions, and Dr. Nagy Eskandar, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Dr. Nagy Eskandar is a medical doctor. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England, and he practiced surgery for 25 years. And doctor, we've been talking about geology.
Exactly.
And now we want to move on with geology.
Exactly. And there are two ways to understand geology. The uniformitarian way of understanding, that means the same rates, those very slow rates that we see nowadays operating on Earth, they believe that happened in the past, and that means there are millions of years in history to bring us to these rates that we are observing nowadays. We have a different way of understanding geology, and that's what we believe as biblical creationist believers. We believe that the catastrophic geology of the flood that lasted for 371 days, with fountains of the deep open, breaking the crust of the earth, causing massive amount of sediment to move from one place to another, causing billions of fossils, mainly marine fossils, to fossilize very quickly, not over millions of years. And that is really was highlighted by Mount St. Helens. And the eruption that happened in Mount St. Helens on the 18th of May, 1980, caused a big canyon, or a canyon, and they took sample from this and sent it to the laboratories. And we'll see on the screen now the radiometric dating. Radiometric dating means the dating based on the radiological decay of elements, and we'll have more of that this session. So they sent this sample, and the age of the rock, as we said, this is igneous rocks. That's different from sedimentary rocks. The igneous rocks is measured from the time where it is lava, which is fluid, to be fully crystallized, that meaning very solid, and that's the age of the rock. They took sample from the dome of the lava, and they sent it to different laboratories, and the results came, as we can see on the screen here. The age of that rock is 340,000 to 2.8 million years. That's massive range. Which one is the accurate figure? Is the truth in between these two figures? But in actual fact, this rock was formed within 12 years, because we have seen it. So it is from solid being lava to being solid, from fluid being lava to solid, it took 12 years, because we observed it. This is happening in the present. We can judge it in the present. But when you give the sample to the lab, they estimated this millions of years and thousands of years. So let me show you a little video explaining what happened in Mount St. Helens to see the force and the power of these volcanic eruptions. I like to imagine during the year of the flood, tsunami action, volcanic eruptions, all the crust of the earth is broken, all the animals and plants outside the ark are embedded in this. It's just a massive effect. And as I said, there is a lovely 2-volume book by Andrew Snelling, who is a PhD in geology, talking about catastrophic history of the Earth, with lots of details and graphs, and for the big geologist, or the
Is that the name of the book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Catastrophic History of the Earth, Andrew Snelling. Mm-hmm. He's a wonderful man. I know him personally as well, but he's a PhD in geology. Let me just tell you something, Michael, about this. He got his PhD from Australia. And when he starts to write about the creation research and creation material, there is a group of people said, we must withdraw his PhD. And they submitted that to the university. Mm-hmm. But the university, after they discussed the case, they felt if we withdraw it, that means we give it wrong in the first place. Mm-hmm. And that will take the credibility of the university altogether. Mm-hmm. So they kept it. And actually, Andrew Snelling, I'm just deviating, David, for a minute, please, had a research permit to go to the Grand Canyon and take some of the rocks to measure them with the understanding of, from the creationist perspective, not from uniformitarian perspective. Mm-hmm. It took ages to get this, but thank God he got it, and the research is on progress. There are initial results, I can't share them, but there will be final results, and it will be presented to the ordinary publication in geology. But the problem, there is a sort of persecution. If somebody writes about Christian geology or creationist geology, they wouldn't publish.
They wouldn't publish.
Unfortunately.
Here in the West.
In the West, yes, with all the freedom we have. So there is a real issue here. That's why in this program, really, the aim is for people to think. We are not dictating or saying you have to believe that, but we're giving the evidence, and the evidence speaks for itself. And people have to decide for themselves.
Right.
If they want to go for a uniformitarian way of thinking, okay, go for that, but we explain the problems with that. The catastrophic geology, we spend many sessions explaining catastrophic geology of the flood. The events of the flood, we believe, according to the Bible, it is an event that happened in history, it is real, and it helps us to understand the world as we see it now. Right, let us see this little video explaining what happened in Mount St. Helens.
On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens, located 95 miles south of Seattle, Washington, erupted. The eruption was triggered by an earthquake centered beneath the mountain that measured 5.1 on the Richter scale. The lateral blast swept out the north side of Mount St. Helens at 300 miles per hour. With temperatures as high as 660 degrees Fahrenheit and the power of 24 megatons of thermal energy, it snapped 100-year-old trees like toothpicks and stripped them of their bark. Before the famous eruption at Mount St. Helens, scientists were mostly familiar with slow-acting examples of geologic change. But at Mount St. Helens, geologists watched the Earth's surface change quite rapidly. Icebergs were buried in hot avalanche material. They melted and formed badlands in days. Eruptions on May 18 and June 10 produced fine layers in hours. On June 10, mud flows cut zigzag canyons 100 feet deep in soft sand and mud, complete with perpendicular side canyons. Canyons that are reminiscent of the geography of Grand Canyon, only 40 times smaller and clearly produced within hours. Mud flows over the following decade cut hundreds of feet into solid rock in just days of cutting time. Fallen trees formed a log mat on the surface of Spirit Lake and dropped bark to the bottom of the lake, accumulating up to 3 feet of bark peat in just a couple years. And vertically floating logs sinking to the bottom of the lake resulted in buried trees in only a decade, similar to the trees of Yellowstone's fossil forest, which are also buried in volcanic layers. Even though Mount St. Helens is a very small catastrophe compared to the flood or the major catastrophes immediately following the flood, it provides a better clue to what happened in those times than the slow geologic processes which are most commonly seen in the present.
So this video really explained the catastrophic event of the Mount St. Helens, the eruption of the volcano, and the layers that formed very quickly because we can see them, we can observe them. And that really shows us if we believe in the flood, and I do believe in the flood because the Bible explained it beautifully, and it is an event that happened. And as a result of the catastrophic geology, all these layers were formed very quickly during the year of the flood, and thereafter there were some after effect of the flood. It wasn't just quiet after the end of the 371 days. There was some ripple effect after the end of the flood. So we have two starting points and two different conclusions in each. Now, let us come to what about carbon dating and other radioisotope dating. That's a big, important issue, and we should address that. There's a lot of physics in this, so we'll try to simplify it as much as we can. And really, people talking about carbon dating is accurate within thousands of years, not millions of years, maximum 100,000 years. So if somebody say, oh, because of carbon date is proved millions of years, you will understand immediately that person doesn't know what he's talking about. So that's just one clue to start with. So people just come with big titles without really understanding the issue at all and say, oh, carbon dating proves that the Bible is wrong. Wow, does it? Carbon dating doesn't date millions of years. But there are other things that date millions of years. Potassium, argon, and others, and we'll discuss them as we go along. So these are the radioactive decay. Radioactive decay depends on the half-life. That means if you have a certain amount, within half-life it becomes half of this amount. If you have the kilogram, for example, of carbon-14, after half-life, which is 5,730 years, it will become half the amount, right? And it will be nitrogen-14. Carbon-14 is changed to nitrogen-14. The stable isotope or the stable element is carbon-12. There is carbon-13 and carbon-14. As I said, there is a lot of physics in this, and I'll try to make it as simple as we can, but the principle is still intact. And that's really the important part. So, potassium argon, the half-life is 1.3 billion years for potassium to form to argon. If there is contamination of argon in the initial specimen, you think there is 1.3 billion years passed already, right? And you have uranium and you have rubidium, and these are the figures in front of us. But let us concentrate on carbon-14 at the bottom. Carbon-14, the half-life is 5,730 years. So the half-life of carbon-14 is 5,730 years to transfer to nitrogen-14. Okay? I know this is difficult. I really appreciate that. But just let us have the basic understanding. And if people wanted more, I'm very happy to address that. But it has to be on personal level rather than in the program fully.
Just a small question. How do we know that this like half-life 49 billion years, if like nobody's going to stay that long to know? Like how do we calculate that?
Yeah, it's calculated in the lab by the emission of the particles, alpha particles and beta particles. And the rate of that can be measured in the lab. And it's mathematical calculation. Nobody will observe going for half a year, half-life with this range, even the 5,000, who will live 5,000 to see that. But it's calculated by the particles, alpha and beta particles that comes, and gamma and others, from the radioactive matter. So this is the aging of them. Radioactive isotopes has many, many applications. In medicine, we use them to identify hotspots and things like that for inflammation and tumors. But that's different from the half-life that we are talking about, okay? So isotopes has a place in our life, in our modern life. And we thank God for them for discovering how they act and helping us to understand things in medicine or other parts, other disciplines in science.
Well, let's if you don't mind, let's take a short break and come back so we can understand this more.
Yes.
Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California, 90740.
Welcome back to What Do You Believe? Let's try to focus on this part so we can get it. Let's go back to carbon dating.
Exactly. The radioactive decay and the rates. Right. Let me give you another example. We spoke about Mount St. Helens and the big range between the 340,000 and 2.8 million years compared to 12 years that we have observed of the formation of that mountain. Now, there are more eruptions and more mountains formed over the years. And let us see if the radioactive dating is accurate or not. So In New Zealand, there were 5 eruptions in 1949. We'll see that on the screen. 1949 to 1975. The potassium-argon assessment of this specimen showed it is 270,000 to 3.5 million years. And in actual age of the rock is less than 50 years old when dated. So the radioactive dating starts with assumptions. And if the assumptions are wrong, you come to conclusions which are wrong. So these are mountains which are formed during our lifespan. People can watch for 50 years developing. So when it was tested, it was less than 50 years of age of that mountain, and the age of the mountain, as I said, from being a lava, which is fluid, to fully crystallized, which is solid. So that mountain in New Zealand proves again that there is massive difference between the real age of a rock, I'm talking about igneous rocks, and the radiometric dating. So
Doctor,
let us.
why would we keep like trying to use the radiometric dating when it's not accurate, or at least when we tried it on rocks that we know the age of, it's not giving us accurate results?
Yeah, we are not trying to use it all the time. We are just trying to see the discrepancy. But the uniformitarian just don't accept anything except the slow progression of forming the mountains.
Even when they saw what happened?
Yeah, this type of research, as I said, is not published. They are suppressing this and they don't want to hear about it. And they say this is minor error and this is aberration from the main figures that we get. And there will be hundreds of other explanations to this. Because the idea is, what is your starting point? What is your reference point? If you understand the geology of the flood and understand the acute events, you have different perspective completely from the millions of years. Let me show you a little video. I hope this will simplify the idea of isotopes and the carbon-14. It's not an easy video to watch. I just warn everybody, you need to concentrate, have your cup of coffee ready, because this really a difficult stuff, but it's important to discuss difficult subjects in a program like this, because we are happy to discuss science, because we believe science. But what type of science? The operational science that we can test in the lab. The historical science, things that happened in the past, we cannot repeat them now, depending on your starting point. If your starting point is atheism, that means matter is everything, time, chance, and laws of nature. That we prove that cannot explain life. We have another starting point, the Bible, God. God is eternal, all-powerful, and he explained himself and gave us accurate history in the Bible explaining how he did make this world. So we have 2 different starting points and
But
2 different...
I think that there's third starting point.
Yes.
That the science depend on.
Yeah, what is it?
The experiment.
Yeah, that's operational.
Yeah, they are not start from atheism. I haven't seen any, or few of them start, or any university or any professor himself starts from atheism or any other atheist believe what I believe or what I have seen or what I have.
That's a limited experience with great respect, because I have met lots of professors who are atheists. What I'm saying
they
here...
They are atheists, but they do not start from the atheist point of view.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think that there is an atheist point of view that they start to
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, their starting is matter is everything. That's right. According to any
science.
Yeah, okay. Matter is everything. Time, chance, and laws of nature. Right? We discussed in different episodes that time, chance, and laws of nature will not form DNA. Time, chance, and laws of nature will not form life. Life comes from life. If I give you all the elements that's necessary in your body, you cannot make Michael.
We've discussed that. I just want to express that what I believe that not all the scientists, but for my point of view, some scientists do that, but most of the scientists or most of the scientists.
Look, we are not assessing the scientists. They have to give account to God, not to us. No, what I'm trying to say is there are 2 ways of doing the experiment. You can do the experiment based on matter and time and chance and laws of nature. And you can do the experiment, say, this is created by God, and I'm going to discover the mechanism, how it came together.
What do you mean by chance?
You mean by mere chance? The evolution believe that natural selection and mutation, by chance, they will bring life. Like
Some of them, but some revolutionists believe that it's not by chance. And
what they believe then in?
They
Who
believe-
guided the process?
Yeah, I will tell you. They believe that there is an intelligence behind it, or there's a
This,
huge intelligent life.
this not evolutionist. This is intelligent
are.
design. No, let me just explain
Okay.
that. Yeah, okay. If there is an intelligent, if it is a guided process, the evolutionists will say no. We believe that it is only by chance. I quoted in the previous episodes Richard Dawkins, which is a known biologist and a known atheist. He said that natural selection is blind. He has no purpose. He doesn't see consequences. But at the end, he formed something as if it is designed. That's his quotation, and I can get
From
that.
Dawkins, but
Yeah.
Einstein, he said that he believed that behind this universe, this great universe, there's a great designer and there's a great mind. But
Okay.
I want to say that not all the atheists or
No.
not all the evolutionists.
Look, I'm not worried about people. People have to give account to God. What I'm talking about is idea. Okay? The evolution idea is based on time, chance, and laws of nature. That's it. They don't have any other force in operation.
And I think we all agree that we all come into one, like looking at one thing with a bias. So
Yeah.
whatever you already believed in, whatever you already had,
Yeah.
and then you walk into a situation and you'll see it from that perspective.
Sure.
And let's move on to the video so we can go
Yeah.
back to the
Right,
carbon
I
dating.
will. But this is that's great, David, because you clarified the point. We are not judging people at all here in this program. At all. We are talking about a way of thinking, right? So the way of thinking materialistic is time, chance, and laws of nature, nothing else. The way of the biblical understanding of creation is there is a God who created things. Like when Isaac Newton discovered the laws of gravity, he didn't invent gravity, he discovered what God has made. And that's really the progress of science. We love science, the operational science, obviously. And this is progressing because of understanding there is a designer behind all of this.
And we've talked throughout the episodes how it's really, really hard to try to find a middle ground because
yeah.
both of them are extremely like opposites or opposite ends to
Yeah.
like in they're going through biology and geology, and we'll see in astronomy also. so.
Exactly, absolutely. Right, let us see this video that I promised will be difficult. And I hope the cup of coffee is not cold by now.
Nearly every textbook and science magazine teaches that the Earth is billions of years old, and the primary dating method used for determining this is what is called radioisotope dating, or radiometric dating. Now, this is a reliable method for measuring absolute ages of rocks and the age of the Earth, right? First off, many scientists now regard the age of the Earth to be between 4.55 and 4.6 billion years old. Okay. So if this method is reliable and accurate, why the 50 million year discrepancy? That seems like a lot. But let's get into some details here and see what's going on. Keep in mind that there's all kinds of scientific jargon on this topic, and so we'll just present a very straightforward, simplified version of the process. Radiometric dating is the process of estimating the ages of rocks based on the decay of radioactive elements in them. Basically, there are certain kinds of atoms in nature that are unstable and spontaneously decay into other kinds of atoms. For instance, uranium will radioactively decay through a series of steps until it becomes the stable element called lead. The original element is called the parent element, and the end result is called the daughter element. Radioisotope dating is commonly used to date igneous rocks, rocks which formed when hot molten material cooled and solidified. The dating clock started when the rock cooled. During the molten state, it is assumed that the intense heat forced any gaseous daughter elements to escape. It is assumed that once the rock cooled, no more atoms escaped, and any daughter element now found in the rock is a result of radioactive decay since that rock formed. The decay rate is measured in terms of half-life, that is, the length of time it takes half of the remaining atoms of a radioactive parent element to decay. Now, of course, that can be measured in a laboratory, and it is assumed that since we know the decay rate, we can calculate backwards and come up with the age of the rock. But is that all there is to it? Here's where it gets tricky. It's true we can measure a decay rate using observational science, but there's another kind of science that is required to accurately calculate dates for rocks, and that is what we call historical science. Historical science deals with the things in the past, and therefore it cannot be repeated and tested. Dating methods require both types of science, because in order to get accurate rock dates, one would have to accurately know both the decay rate and the initial conditions of the rock sample, right? Since radioisotope dating uses both types of science, we can't directly measure the ages of rocks. There are assumptions involved. For instance, how do we know what the initial conditions were in the rock sample? How do we know the amounts of parent or daughter elements now in that sample haven't been altered by other processes in the past? How does someone know the decay rate has remained constant since the rock formed? The answer is they don't. Let's simplify here and talk about a typical hourglass. Let's say you walk into a room and you see an hourglass with sand at the top and sand at the bottom, and some sand sprinkling from the top chamber to the bottom. Well, observational science would allow us to see and measure the sand, and then calculate how long the hourglass has been running, right? We could make our sand measurements and then calculate when the hourglass was turned over, right? Well, those calculations could be wrong, because we may have failed to consider some major assumptions, like, was there any sand at the bottom when the hourglass was turned over? Has any sand been added or taken out of the hourglass? Has the sand always been falling at a constant rate? Since we did not observe the initial conditions when the hourglass started, and we haven't been watching the sand all the time since then, we must make assumptions. All three of those assumptions can affect our time calculations. Now, of course, there's more to understanding all of this, but enough said.
I hope it helped us a little bit to understand what is the meaning of half-life and how we calculate. And the hourglass is a good example, because you can measure the amount of sand in the top, amount of sand at the bottom, and you know the rate of drop of sands from the top to the bottom, and then you calculate the time. But if you put some water at the top, the rate of flow will decrease. If while you are not watching, somebody added some at the top, or the hourglass started with some in the bottom to start with, all the calculations will be wrong. So the half-life is a good way of measurement, and it is the one which is used in the laboratories. You can measure the alpha particles and the beta particles and the things that's coming out. Yes, you can measure that in the lab accurately. That's nothing, that's operational science. There is no problem with that. But to come to the final calculation, that needs a lot of assumptions.
Well, thank you, Doctor. Thank you guys for being here. Winston Churchill said, the longer you look back, the further you can see forward. So look back at history, look back at your own life, ask yourself, what do you believe? Thank you for watching.